Welcome to the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. My name is Lauren Wells, here with my co-host, Chris Seveney. We're committed to providing you with the knowledge required to build wealth through real estate investing. Tired of consuming content about real estate? Stuck in analysis paralysis? Ready to do your first deal? As a member of our community, you will learn how to go from consuming content to taking that first step into the world of real estate investing. Our show is not about getting rich quick, but about providing you with the knowledge you need to take action. Join us as we speak with experienced investors who share action tips on how to escape the corporate world, start a thriving side hustle in the world of real estate, and go beyond your W-2 or 401k. My name is Lauren Wells, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris Seveney. Welcome to the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast, where each week we bring you education and information that will help you take your next step in building wealth through real estate. So this episode, we want to talk about networking, the power of networking the right way, the wrong way, and how it can help you really excel your career in real estate. So Chris, we kind of talked about this on the last episode, which is why we're talking about it more on this episode. Tell me what your thoughts are on networking in general.
I'm surprised I'm even allowed to talk on this episode because
yeah, you can ask me questions if you want to reverse.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask. Oh, we're gonna have to reverse this one because Lauren's the one with the awesome personality and the networking skills, and there's me, the engineer, who kind of you let me out of my basement. I think have the red stapler, if you can see it behind me, in the basement. For me, networking is, I don't even know how to define networking.
Yeah. So I guess, how would you define networking?
That's actually a great question.
I just asked you a question.
Yeah. See, for me, networking is, I guess, a form of communication where you're really trying to building out your business through, I'll use almost like teamwork. How do you define network? I have no idea. That's wow. I'm usually not stumped too easily, but this one I'm going to be stumped a lot. So how do you define networking? I'm going to push back on you.
I kind of try not to overcomplicate it. I just view networking as meeting as many people as you can and finding common interest and talking. I don't know. I feel like it's having conversations with people who are of like mind, like networking.
So as part of that, so I'm just going to roll right into it.
Yeah.
There's different ways to network. There's in person and of course now over internet, like Zoom. What should be somebody's goals, if they're going to go to a networking event?
Yeah. So I think definitely since COVID, networking has changed drastically because a lot of, for example, like you said, there's many different avenues. You used to have a lot of in-person events, whether it was local real estate investing clubs or conferences. But now a lot of things are kind of either done via Zoom, whether it's just because it's easy and convenient for a lot of people, or just because that's the new way things are being done. So I think I think you need to know what your goals are going into a specific, whether it's an in-person meeting or a live conference. What are your goals for that specific meeting? Not necessarily what are your goals, and then what are your goals for networking in general? So what I mean by that is when you go to, for example, a local real estate investment club, is wise to see, not only evaluate, is this topic relevant to what I'm looking to do?
For me, if I was going to a real estate investment club group, like you said, you kind of set your goals as a new investor. It could be meeting people who are in the space just to pick their brain. It could be understanding a certain neighborhood. It could be meeting potential lenders at that club. It could be meeting potential sellers of assets. There's a lot of different people who are going to be there. So I think you need to almost map out, okay, what are my needs, or what are the people I kind of look at as building relationships with or building my team, and are they going to be at this event? And if they are, what are the types of conversations I'd want to have with them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I also am just thinking it also depends on the person you are. So for me, My goal is just to meet and talk to as many people at an event as possible,
Mhm.
because I think you never know what someone's doing, who they know, and just, strike, or what value you can actually provide them. Some of the best conversations I've had at events have been with people I never thought like I would have spoken with, and we are able to have like a good partnership. I'm able to provide them value, because what you do, taking away from or walking away from like a in-person event, your goal should be to, one, follow up with the people that you connected with. And when I say connected, not like every single person, but the people that you're like, oh, I actually have something I can help them with and they can help me with. I look at networking as like a two-way street, which I think is one of the big pitfalls of a lot of people, where they're just like, what can I get from this person? What can I get from this person? I want to make all these connections, and like that's going to help me. Whereas I look at it as, when you go to a conference, I'd say your goal should be to, one, talk to as many people as you can. And then two, go after you at the end of the day, because we all know those conferences are like just a whirlwind of information and people, and you're exhausted at the end of the day. But I really feel like it's important to write down or type in your notes or on your phone, whatever, who you met, what, a little bit about them, and like who you want to follow up with. So then when you do get home from, say, this conference, you can go ahead and follow up with them. And I think it's always important to like really reference your conversation, and not just make it like hey, like we talked about in the last episode, can I pick your brain on this? Or what can you do for me? That's everyone's looking what you can do for them. So really, what can you provide someone is important.
Yeah, as we kind of probably will call this like top tips on how to network. One of the things that I do is when I do reach out to people, I'll typically, and I'll take like notes, and when I refer back to them, because everybody meets so many people and you sometimes forget like who is who, I'll make in my reply back to them, I'll remember something from the conversation or put something in the conversation that they would remember me by. For example, like right now we've started using those OVU digital cards. And most people see those, oh, those are cool. Like, yeah, I'm the guy who had the, the digital card that you scanned, because that use that at IMN, and people are like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then people kind of remember you from that component. I have a question for you. So we're talking about networking, and you mentioned like you're really outgoing. You can walk up to anybody. For me, I'm like, oh man, like,
it's draining.
It's draining. So what's the best way to strike a conversation up with somebody if you're an introvert, the person you're talking to is an introvert, or, is there an icebreaker, or how do you kind of kick off a conversation with somebody? Because like anything, getting started, or most people like don't want to go up to somebody. They see somebody kind of standing there kind of alone, by themselves or whatnot. How do you approach them? How do you start?
Well, you might find this hard to believe, but I actually, until maybe like 6 years ago, I feel like I was an introvert. It wasn't really like in my nature to just automatically strike up conversations with people. What I found now that I'm like swung hard the other opposite direction is the easiest way, when I was starting to kind of try to have more conversations and knew that was like something that would help me and I needed to get better at, was when I start conversations, it's never about something in real estate or something in the topic I'm trying to learn about. It's always, if you're about, for example, if I'm at a coffee shop and I'm like, see someone, it could be a comment on their outfit, like anything outside, anything that's actually interesting to me outside of what I'm actually trying to learn, because I think it just kind of takes people's shields and brings them down a little bit, because you have to imagine if you're someone who has a lot to offer, you're probably sitting there like used to people wanting to just pick your brain and learn a whole bunch from you. So I think by like just like allowing someone to kind of drop their shield, talking about anything other than the weather, but like dropping a comment around something completely outside of whatever the conference is about, whether it's real estate or whether it's sales or whatever it is. I think it's just good to talk about something, drop a line about something that you're interested in that they might have done or said. I think that starts the conversation and kind of makes it more conversational than this like weird interview where you're trying to get information out of someone.
So walking up to somebody and saying like, "Hey, what do you do?" is probably not the.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're in like a group setting, because sometimes at conferences, it's like a whole bunch of people, I
Yep.
think that could be appropriate because you're actually genuinely learning what people do as there's many people involved in a conversation. But like, if you're at most of the conversations that end up being gems, I would say, are held
Mhm.
after the actual event, whether it's at, a cocktail party or a happy hour or, lunch, whatever it is. I think having striking that conversation over like, if, for example, you're at the bar ordering a drink, the guy next to you orders something that you've never tried. Hey, what's in that? I've never heard of that drink before. Like it's
Yeah.
something so simple that gets you to kind of start having that conversation.
Mhm.
And then it kind of, I feel like, evolves from there. They get to actually know who you are rather than like what you're trying to learn from them.
Because that's always, something that is tough, is that initial, again, icebreaker. And I guess the next question I'll ask is, if somebody comes back to you and says like, "Oh, what do you do?" Should you have kind of your elevator pitch or, I know everyone typically talks about that, but from the events I go to, when I meet people, it's almost like everybody has that same elevator pitch. Like, we're note investors. Oh, I buy non-performing notes and try and keep borrowers in their property. And it's like, okay, I heard that recording like 27 times.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, part of me is thinking like, no, what do you really do? Or
Yeah.
like what motivates you to do this, or, something along those lines. So I'm just curious, how you approach that scenario.
Yeah. I think being, and this word is probably super overused in the last year, but being authentic to who you are and like what you're actually hoping to do will be like a breath of fresh air for someone who's heard 50 million times, like, oh, I invest in long-term rentals, or I'm investing in mortgage notes. Again, they've heard that a million times. More so, I would say if you're a newer investor, I would just say that. I think really a lot of people try to hype up that they're like have done more or more involved in real estate than they are.
Mhm.
And I do believe people see through that. I would just say like, I attended this conference. I'm new to the note investing world, and I'm really hoping to just learn a bunch about, from the people who are involved in the industry, especially people who have been in it for a long time. So I'm just trying to talk and meet as many people as I can.
I love talking to people who are just getting started, because they haven't gone through, down that roller coaster ride probably that most of us have gone through. So just sharing some of those stories with them, and, kind of like, it's like hanging out with high school, kids from high school, and sharing some of those war stories going back in the day with somebody who didn't go to school with you and kind of, joke around with. But for me, and I think sometimes newer investors are afraid or timid to go up to, I shouldn't use afraid, timid to go up to speak to people who have a little more experience, but you shouldn't. You should go up to them and, talk to them and let them know. Yeah. Like you said, don't try and BS them by thinking like, oh, I've done this and that. Just be upfront. Yeah, I'm new to space. I'm here to kind of meet new people and learn and see what people are going on, and what's the atmosphere for the next 6 to 12 months in this space. Do people think it's going to be something where it's, on the upswing, downswing, and just have that conversation. And then people truly appreciate you more because of that.
Yeah. And I think you have to remember, like at one point, every super experienced investor was a new investor.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it would sometimes be refreshing to be like, oh, wow, like this is cool. I was there too at one point.
Yeah.
And in a way, who knows who you'll connect with. Let me ask you, what are some, when people are, because you've been in it for a while and, people know you're kind of a boss when it comes to mortgage notes. So look at you get all awkward. What are some things that are, in your opinion, as someone who's, people are coming to learn more from, like turnoffs or like no goes, like it makes you not want to talk to them?
When they try and hype up their experience is one. Like, they bought 2 notes, but they walk around and just give this impression like they've been doing it and they've mastered everything. And, or they just come across as they think they know everything, because you'll never know anything in any aspect of real estate. I've built many buildings. I've renovated many buildings. I've, bought lots of notes. And every day I experience something I've never experienced before. And it's a constant learning curve. This isn't like calculus where there's one formula, you plug it in and it's black and white, and here's the answer. Everything regarding real estate has a huge gray. There's very little black and white. So that is one. The other is when people come to you and they just want to try and, I'll say, pull as much information from you and have nothing to kind of give back. And you don't need to have anything to give back, but it's when like somebody like continues to run up to you and ask you questions of, oh, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about this? Or what about that? And, it's almost
It's not
like
conversational. It's
no.
more like you're being interviewed.
Yeah. And it's more like they want me to train them on the spot on something. And trust me, I help a lot of people, and I'm always willing to, get on the phone or get on Zoom or in person, sit down and, talk to somebody and, try and share my experiences, or if they're stuck in a situation, help them.
Mhm.
But the people who do zero research and just want you to kind of give them, the fast pass to go down the easy lane. It's like there isn't one. So that's probably the two most the biggest ones that I've seen.
Yeah, and that second one I feel like really like speaks to, you can ask those questions and get there with someone, but like you have to build, like it's like dating. It's like you got to build the trust in the relationship before you like move to the next step, whatever that is, moving in, marriage, whatever. But like, I feel like a lot of people approach this as like you said, it's just like speed dating, where you're just like asking a bunch of interviews, and that's not how it should be approached. Something I want to talk about is when you're going to a conference, pre-conference, before you've left, or pre-networking event, whatever, or any event where there's any sort of website or where you can see who the speakers are, who's going to be there. I think it's really important to do your due diligence beforehand. So seeing who's going to be speaking, and then who you want to connect with, like make a mental list of like, yeah, I want to talk to as many people as possible, but there's also 3 people that I'm like laser focused on. I will have a conversation with this person.
Yeah. Huge mistake I made when I went to Florida was, IMN, which is a big event, has the list. And a lot of people were setting up meetings prior. And I set up like 1 or 2, but I should have set up like 20 meetings prior. And I'm kicking myself now that I was like, oh my God, what a like, and again, I haven't been to conferences in several years. I'll call it a rookie mistake of, next conferences, I got to set that up. And if you're signing up for a conference, feel free to ask them like, hey, can I get the invite list or who's attending, and see if they'll give it to you, and say, hey, look, I only want it to try and set up some meetings with people I know beforehand. I will not use it for marketing. I'm not going to put it in my MailChimp account and just blast everyone off. You can just give me the names, and then I can, reach out to the people individually who I know or want to meet, or what companies are going to be there. Some will give them to you, some will not.
But if
it
they
really
don't,
depends.
Yeah. And if they don't give it to you, still look at their website, the conference website. They'll at least list like the names of the speakers usually.
Yep.
And typically you can kind of find their information on LinkedIn or whatever. And like you said, maybe send a note beforehand. So what other tips do you have when it comes to networking offline? So, or not in person, I guess you could say.
Well, I was going to say, I have
It's
two
online,
other,
I guess.
I was going to say 2 other mistakes I have in person that I just wanted to mention. One is, don't spend the entire time with people you know.
Yes.
I see that where it's kind of like you get a click of, oh, I know these people, let me just hang out with the people I know. That is something that you shouldn't do. Go up to groups, or kind of find somebody you do know and go up to other groups and talk to people. So that is one. And the other is don't get drunk, while during the main areas of the conference. If you go out afterwards at night and so forth, have a blast. But during the conference, I'd recommend don't be that person. One of the conferences I was at, it was 3:00 in the afternoon, and somebody was completely blitzed. And I was like, whoa. And again, 20 years ago, I probably would have been that guy, maybe, I don't know. But, it's almost like the company Christmas party. You don't want to be that person.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. So those are 2 things I'd mention for in person. Don't Don't just hang out with your typical crew, go meet other people. And then, if you're going to enjoy yourself later on in the evening.
Agree on all three. When it comes to, kind of from your perspective, one thing I say is like, always have something to offer, like always be able to provide value of some sort as from my, like, if I'm being the newer investor. And I know people are like, well, I don't have anything to provide. I'm like new, I'm just starting out. What would you say is something that you see as like value that they might not necessarily see as value?
Everybody has value because everybody, even though they might be new to real estate investing, it's like they just weren't born yesterday. They've been doing something for a very long period of time. And I'm sure they're very good at something that they've been doing. And they have something of value that they just have to figure out what it is that they can bring to individuals. Before you got into real estate, you worked in technology, in sales. So you could easily help somebody on what we're talking about today, networking. I have a background in real estate and you had none in your family has real estate. But if somebody hadn't had real estate, I can share some of my knowledge in real estate. Somebody may have a background in finance. Somebody may have worked in title. Somebody may have been, an inspector and understands some of those aspects. I've talked to people who are school teachers who, you have a membership group, Chris group. Hey, here are some of the things how like people like to learn. So everybody has something that they, are good at. And, understanding that and potentially seeing if you can help somebody, how it relates to real estate or whatever it is you're investing in or working in, I think has tons of value.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't have to be something where you're like, just to clarify, reaching out to these people after and being like, hey, I can do this for you. That's awkward. No. But, if you remember the conversation you have and craft an email that isn't generic to them and they actually open up and you're able to like start having that conversation and that dialogue, it will be really easy for you to then be like, oh, I used to do sales. Like, do you have any sort of lead gen for investors you're working with or buyers and sellers? I'd love to help you with that. Like, it doesn't have to be this awkward pitch from the second you meet them, the first conversation.
Or all of a sudden it's like, somebody says, oh yeah, I invest in, the West Coast of Florida in, Tampa area. Oh yeah, I think I have a friend that I went to school with that is actually a realtor in that area. Let me maybe hook you up with them and see if there's a connection. Something like that. I mean, there's so many different ways.
Networking is really listening, essentially, and hearing what the other person has to say rather than just thinking about the next question and the next thing you need from them. So I could say when it comes to value, really the best thing you can do is just actually listen to what the other person is saying, which seems so like, duh, of course. But you'd be surprised and you can kind of tell when people are talking to you, if they're actually listening or if they're like thinking about something else or the next question or the next, whatever it might be.
The best analogy I hear when you say that is pretend the person is you're a doctor and they're the patient. When you go to a doctor's office and doctor says, how are you feeling? You're talking. The doctor's not thinking about, oh, what am I going to say? Or, advance. He's listening to every single thing you're saying to digest it, to then provide the response. So that's kind of what somebody mentioned in the past. I'm like, that's actually a pretty good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. So really networking is, and I guess we can go back to that. Networking is really listening, meeting people and listening to what they have to say.
That's our definition. There we go.
There you go. What else about networking? Do's, don'ts.
Well, you mentioned, so we talked a lot about in person and then you started to shift it to, virtual Zoom, not in-person types of networking. How is it different or how should you take it differently?
I think that this is where the introverts like have a leg up, not a leg up necessarily, but this is an avenue for them, for people who aren't super comfortable going to networking or in-person events, is a way for them to kind of start practicing and having those conversations. And I think there's a few ways to do that. A few ways to kind of network is one, I would say find all of the Facebook groups that are relevant to what you're interested in. I would definitely narrow it down. I wouldn't just find all Facebook groups. And then I would join them and I would start going through all of the posts and seeing if there's any way I could, one, add value again, whether, and not because in those groups, not all of the posts are specifically very like real estate focused. It could be like you said, does anyone know of a real estate agent in Florida? Or does anyone know how to work with this marketing widget? Like the questions are all across the board because at the end of the day, it's still a business, and a business has all those facets, the sales, the marketing, the customer support, success. So I think it's for the introverts, it's like, oh, great. Like I don't have to like have this face-to-face conversation with someone. So I think there's a huge advantage there for everyone to be able to just go into groups and start commenting, start being engaged. People see your name. People see like, oh, this person is like not going away. They're interested. And then when it comes to Zoom, I feel like that would be like the next step.
Well, before we get on the Zoom, it kind of just popped in my head. I never even realized like posting in like Facebook groups or LinkedIn is a form of networking.
It is.
And it's very interesting.
Forget.
And, two things that I would say drive me nuts that I see on those sites or in those groups. One is political posts. Like if you're in a group talking real estate, now you can talk about the effects of a political decision on real estate. For example, okay, the state shut down, evictions because of COVID. Okay, but don't all of a sudden go on a tangent, whether you're on the left or the right, and then blame it on this or that, because it happens on both sides. But, I see way too much deep dives into politics, which it's like, okay, nobody really wants to.
Belong here.
Yeah, it doesn't belong there. And all you're doing is you're basically setting yourself up to have at least 50% of the people in that group, probably even more, not want to be involved with you, because realistically, it's probably a third on one side, a third on the other, and a third who are independent. So stay away. The second is what I call somebody who just took training and then took like speed. It's like, oh, I just took this training. Now I'm going to take some drugs and just I'm going to just market the heck out of something. And all of a sudden they just start posting to groups of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I've got this, I've got that. I'm going to, people want to raise money, give me money, or whatever the case may be. And it's basically almost like that person's wearing
like
that. Yeah. And that person's wearing the tattoo because the experienced investors can basically pinpoint, oh, they took this person's training last weekend because we've been there, done that. So that's the kind of the other area where, you got to be careful. And like you mentioned, if you're going to post in a group from on like networking or ask questions, make sure they're questions that are like leading, not how do I invest in notes? How do I invest in real estate? Well, seriously, like nobody can answer that. If you say, hey, I was looking at note investing and I realized X, Y, or Z, can somebody explain that to me? Then you're going to get a much better response.
I agree. Yeah, I'd say thoughtful questions versus generic, like I want to get to the end result questions.
Yeah. So
are the way to go. Again, because everyone at some point has been there. Every investor started out. Mm-hmm. So, and I do find that the real estate community is very willing to help and answer questions, just like come with actual thoughtful questions and not just like, give me the answer questions.
And it's interesting because I was on Bigger Pockets the other day and somebody made a post. If you're an SEC attorney or have worked, with syndications, please reach out to me. And like a bunch of us posted similar things like, hey, I've got one. If you're interested, I can send you your contact information. And the person replies back, nope, if they're on here, they'll reach out to me. And I'm like, that's probably not the right way to do it because it kind of sounds a little pompous, but most attorneys who do syndication stuff aren't really spending a ton of the good ones aren't really spending their time on, forum websites. I'm sorry. They've got, a lot of other things going on in their world. But so you were talking then shifting over to Zoom calls or video conferencing, whatever you may want to call it.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you just brought something up, and before I lose this thought, I think that there's the power behind networking. Obviously, if you meet the right person, you're building your education, your knowledge. But for example, you are like all over BiggerPockets. And so for me, I know this because half the people I speak to that, want to come and invest with Seveney all find you on BiggerPockets. So not only are like new investors, it's basically networking you should be doing in some capacity, no matter how experienced you are in real estate, because it helps the newer investors in one way, gain connections, knowledge, and start their business. But then people like who are more experienced, if they're doing networking correctly, whether it's showing up in person more, speaking engagements, webinars, being like all over BiggerPockets, that can lead in people being interested in either investing with them, learning from them, whatever that might be. So I think it's something where people think networking is something you do until you have your business and then like you're good. But I think that if you continue to network throughout as you grow, you're only going to help yourself more and you're going to scale faster.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So we were talking about Zoom, the rise of Zoom since COVID. Can
I just say that what's the one Microsoft had that not Teams, the one before that people used to video conference, Skype. Skype had like a 10-year head start on Zoom and they completely dropped the ball for COVID. So it's like, amazing, kind of like MySpace, I guess, if you remember that. It's like, I still get people, hey, do you Skype? I'm like, I did when I had an AOL address, but.
I think the cool thing about Zoom kind of becoming a new way of networking because of COVID is you can now really connect. Like for me, I love having coffee conversations. Like I actually enjoy meeting people for coffee that I've connected with and having a conversation. So now I feel like I can do that with anyone. So for someone like me who really just loves talking to people and learning, I think it's opened up more doors because you can essentially have a coffee conversation over Zoom where you're still, it's not a phone call, which I feel is like a little bit less formal, but you can actually see people, see their facial expressions, their reaction, and it's not limited to your, geographic location. So.
Yeah. Oh, I agree 100%. And what I appreciate over the last few years has been pre-COVID, if you were on a Zoom call, it was like dead serious, everything. If a kid like ran across the screen, it would be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But then, once COVID hit, like reality set in of everyone's just dealing with chaos. And the time, like, okay, if your kid comes and sits on your lap or whatnot, or like someone's cat is on the screen, it's like, it was taken with, it just passed muster. And I remember one time I told my son, I'm like, okay, I'm on an important call, so please don't come downstairs unless like, you're bleeding profusely. Yeah. So all of a sudden I see him come downstairs. He had blood everywhere, like covered in blood. All of a sudden I'm like, excuse me, my son's covered in blood right now. He had a bloody nose, and he had allergies and his nose got dry and, so he got bloody nose and stuff. But I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, and I come back to the call and I'm like, still like, because I got like blood all over my hands and stuff. I'm like, oh, let me just go wash that and stuff. But, it's much more relaxed, I guess, but as somebody who raises money, I found being able to do video conferencing very powerful, because in the past, it's like, okay, you set up a call or email people, but I would tell people, hey, let's do Zoom so you can actually like, proverbially see me, touch me, feel me, on a video call, that I'm a real person and that I'm not some robot. I'm not a machine. I'm not working out of, some African country, telling you you got $5 million coming from the World Bank or IMF, from some lost uncle or aunt. It's goes so much further, and then people can kind of see your facial expressions, your personality. So I found video conferencing to be extremely powerful from a networking platform, because like you said, you can also scale it so much better. Whereas you can set up these calls, or a 15-20-minute call, one or two a day, versus having to drive and go somewhere, especially people who have family. Because most investors who we talk with, investing is not our full-time gig. We have other jobs, we have family, we've got normal problems everybody else has.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I took my first like corporate sales job, it was 2012, 2013. And it wasn't Zoom. Zoom wasn't a thing. So before that, it was GoToMeeting, Citrix. Yeah. So,
Oh,
but
painful.
when you're, one of the things that the sales team, sales leadership was very adamant about was making sure your camera was on. And I
Mhm.
feel like I was just so used to that. But until COVID, I don't feel like as many people use their camera. You would be
Mhm.
on meetings with like a Zoom picture, or would just say like Lauren Wells in
Mhm.
white across the screen. And I feel like you said, I think it was because it relaxed it. And so people were okay showing up. If their kid was in the background, it wasn't like a big deal. So I do agree with you. I think that putting a actual face to a person's name and hearing them and kind of interacting in this way definitely leads to more investors if you're someone who's looking to raise money, for example.
So, and it's interesting because one of the people who I buy the most notes that I probably bought from, never met him, never Zoomed him, never seen a picture of him, and stuff. So it's crazy. I mean, but we talk, by the way, you got that main asset if you want it, just text me back. So uh, we just bought 3 notes basically on the span of this call, this recording. So it's always good news for Friday.
Yes.
So what I guess we've been talking a little bit now about networking, and we thought this would be a short episode, but it's actually turned into a very good episode. And again, somebody starting out, if you could go back and rehash, what do you think are the top 3 things they need to do and top 3 things they shouldn't need to do? What do you think those are?
So I think when it comes to networking, if you're a newer investor or you're someone who's looking to like do your first deal, or even if you're just getting started, like the sooner the better. I think you, whether it's something that comes natural to you or not, should set like weekly goals around how many people you're going to reach out to. And now, again, it doesn't have to be in person, but I'm going to attend my weekly local real estate investment club group. I'm going to post in 5 different Facebook groups, not necessarily my own original post, but like I'm going to, add value to other people's questions. I'm going to try to connect and set 1 or 2 new coffee chats, whatever that is, a week based off the people I'm speaking with. So setting like metrics, I think in the beginning, especially if you're not comfortable with it, and it's not something that comes easy to you, I think that is something that every new investor should do. Setting metrics around networking and how many people they intend to reach out to, intentionally reach out to. We talked about this last episode, not, hey, saw you do short-term rentals, would love to connect and hop on a call and learn more, but like actual intentional networking. The second thing I would say is for newer investors, or again, any investor, is to focus on your online presence, because, and this is related to networking, even though people might not think so. I'm not saying you have to have a full-blown website that says you do way more than you do, but if you have a Facebook profile, if you have a LinkedIn profile, like make sure it looks professional. Facebook, like I'm not saying you have to have super professional. If you have kids and family, don't like hide that. But for example, on LinkedIn, make sure that you have a LinkedIn, put your picture up, show what you're doing. You don't need to, because if I get a message from someone, the first thing I'm going to do is go to LinkedIn and then to Facebook to see if I can find out who this person is. So I would say like establish your online presence and make sure that you're putting your best like foot, face, whatever forward. And then the third thing I would do is really take a look at, if you're looking at in-person events, I would strategically attend them, because they do cost money between the ticket, the airline, the hotel, everything. So really, if you're going to go to an event, I would have very clear goals and what you hope to walk away with. So if you, instead of attending all of the events, I would say, look at who in your asset class, which ones they're going to, who's your person that you admire, which ones are they going to? What can you take away from those? And don't just go to like every conference. It's just not realistic. It's not scalable. So I'd say those are the 3 things that I would focus on.
Question for you that popped in my head. What are your thoughts on the so-called masterminds?
I think it depends. Like, again, I think everything comes back to expectations and goals and what you're hoping to get out of it. If you go into a mastermind, I think it depends if it's like hey, like, let me help build my brand around real estate. That's something completely different than let me help, or like, I'm hoping to acquire 10 rental properties. So I think it's just having super clear expectations and making sure that the sponsor is like really committed to the mastermind. And it's not like a weekly, I don't know, call, like some of these masterminds are $25,000 plus, like easy.
Yeah.
So like we have mentioned before, can you take that 25,000 and put it somewhere else and have it do more for you? Because you can get as much networking and connection out of a Facebook group as you can a mastermind if you put the effort in. And I think that's what they're like, well, I gained such a great community and I met so many people. And my response would be like, you could have done that without paying $25,000 for free. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't believe that, or you're not sure, you can drop me an email and I will help you with that. Because I would hate to see you spend $25,000 just to meet people. It has to be very intentional. Like, again, helping you set up your marketing flow, set up your sales systems and your processes that will add value. Helping you grow your business is very generic. Helping you invest in learn how to invest in short-term rentals. Like you can do that in another way.
So a few things popped in my head when you were talking.
Obviously, I felt strongly about that.
Oh, no, you did. So a few things popped in my head is when you mentioned networking. And not only, this is more for experienced investors, because we talk about newer investors, but experienced investors constantly reach out to people who you consider equals or peers, people above you. And you have to think, oh, that person runs like $100 million fund. They would never talk to me. Well, we're going to run a $75 million fund. And if somebody starting out reaches out to us, we'll, we'll make time to have conversations with them. So you're never too big. Don't ever think somebody's too big for you, and never be too big for somebody. That would be probably one, because you can reach out to people who are your peers or like people who are the next step up above you, and you can get a lot of value from those conversations. And whether it's you're buying them coffee or say, hey, can I just pick your brain for 10 minutes? But make sure when you do that, it's something that is targeted or focused, like what the conversation is, and sometimes it might just be a check-in, but if it's someone you've never spoken with before, kind of have a purpose for the call. The second thing is any part of any networking, make sure you have a decent email address. If you can get one based on your company and pay the $5 a month for domain, that's fine. But, don't be like drunkpeter1980@gmail.com. It doesn't come off as professional. So that's one thing, you want to have that professional image as part of networking. It's okay to, hang out with people and share some stories and have fun, but you always kind of want to be looking professional. And a lot of times the first thing people sometimes look at is, the email address. And if it's some, cheesy or like your personal Gmail address that's kind of goofy, or
like I love pizza@gmail.com, probably not the most credible.
Yeah. And you have a picture of something that is just completely out there and stuff, people aren't going to take you serious. So those are my items.
Anything else? Any other thoughts?
I'm not the networking person. I don't like to go to events, for example, Jamie, who we used to podcast, it took us, 100 episodes before I got to meet him. I hopefully get to meet you before we do 100 episodes, but yeah.
But look, this is like kind of, I'd say our relationship now and where we are with the business is based off of networking, was built from networking.
And don't think that you have to go to every event to network, because, over the last several years, people have been able to significantly grow their business just by doing what we're doing right now, talking on a video call. And
I think one more point I want to make is when it comes to networking, it doesn't have to be about when you're listening. For example, when you're listening to people speak, say at an online conference, it doesn't have to be about what the person has done or is doing. It can be if you resonate with their personality. So I'm going to go back to you and I, for example, like I liked your topic of conversation because at the event I heard you speak at, you were talking about, like, again, I'm sure we've talked about this and we'll bring it up many times in the future, but all the things that can go wrong with note investing. And I'm a very direct, like no BS type of person. So I really enjoyed hearing someone, and I think I was like laughing a little bit through it, like, whoa, like not many other people have spoken like this straight and to the point. So he's a straight shooter. I love that. Like, no BS, great. Like, telling me all the things I can do wrong or can go wrong, awesome. And you can get a sense for people's personalities through their speaking engagements and how they talk. So if you even just listening to people on podcasts, you're like, oh, this is someone I feel like I would get along with. Like, I would email them over the person who has a ton of experience in your specific area, because I feel like if you feel like you can connect with someone, that's what networking is, connecting with people and listening. Here we go.
I've got one final thought that as well. It's like trying to get me to shut up.
Someone who doesn't like networking.
Yeah, no, I've had some of the most, I'll call it like eye-opening conversations with people who I didn't think I should even have the call with. No, I had somebody who had a software that basically I would never use, but it's like, hey, can you just talk to you, kind of understand how you manage things and to do things. I had the conversation with the guy, and he taught me so much of things like other ways I can improve my business from a systems and other performances. Another was I was talking to somebody at, basically that did a lot of auctions and so forth. And they gave me so many insights on other ways to potentially source assets that I thought it was going to be like a waste of a conversation. And I ended up learning so much information from those conversations when I went into them thinking, I'm just like, okay, let me just give them 10 or 15 minutes of their time and we'll go from there. But it was really eye-opening.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, obviously this is something I'm super passionate about because I just love talking to people and I love learning. So like, I'm going to throw this out there. If someone is listening to this and they're like dread networking, or they don't understand what value they can bring, or any questions about that, I would challenge you to email me at lauren@seveneyinvestments.com. And I will have a conversation with you. I will let you pick my brain. And really, I just want to throw that out there because I think leaving that door open for people who might not be comfortable reaching out to people, message me. I'm more than happy to talk.
I'm not going to make that offer. If you want to reach out,
totally fine.
You can reach out to me at lauren@seveneyinvestments.com.
And I'll be sure that Lauren gets your email.
You want to bring it home?
Yep. So thank you guys so much for joining us today on this episode of the CWS podcast. I hope you learned tips, tricks, do's and don'ts of networking. And if you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, subscribe, or leave us a review. Or in this case, email me. Till next time, guys.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you for joining Lauren and I on this episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. Each week, we bring you expert education, experience, and information in a digestible format to help you identify investment opportunities so you can build wealth through real estate and take action toward your financial goals. Enjoy the show, share with a friend, or subscribe to the show and leave us a review.